people try to make it like it's different for every customer and like this and that. And I'm like, there's a prescriptive road they have to go down. They have to plug this in, turn this on, do this thing, and then they get there. And if you refuse to see that, you'll never get anywhere with your customers.
Welcome to Onboarding Therapy. I'm Kim, and today Sherelle and I are joined by Matthew Ruxton, who shares his journey from implementation specialist to RevOps leader and why process beats personalization in customer onboarding. Let's get into it. Okay, so welcome to Onboarding Therapy. For this episode, we have Matthew Ruxton on, who's been a longtime friend of Arrow's. We've known you for years at this point and always we were just talking about your hot takes on onboarding and HubSpot and all the things. To get started, I would love if you could give a background on you, how you got into implementation and what
Yeah.
you're doing now.
Yeah, if we want to go way back, we can talk about as a young boy. I dreamed of growing up in an implementation. So like my first foray into SaaS, I would say I did lots of years selling coffee for various large coffee chains that we will not name for legal reasons. But after leaving that, I was like, it's time to not sell coffee anymore. So I ran into a company that was like, hey, we're starting up a support function. And I was like, that sounds like fun. So got into like customer support. Then they're like, hey, we need to build an onboarding function. And I'm like, I could do that. And I've been sitting in support this time. And I'm going, wow, every time you handle tickets, you're like, this issue is resultant of you having a terrible onboarding. Like the fact that we're fixing this is because it wasn't fixed at the start. So let's do that. And I was like, yeah, I want to move up the chain. Like, let's fix it early so we don't have the amount of support tickets that we have today. So like I moved into onboarding and then like climbed up the onboarding ladder as like an onboarding associate, then an onboarding specialist, then an implementation manager. And I'm like just kind of like slowly working my way up. And then after that, kind of did a little bit of fun time in a completely unrelated industry with doors, and then got into HubSpot and CRM, started in Salesforce, and then quickly learned that Salesforce is very diluted with tech talent. And there's lots of great talented people in Salesforce, but it's very hard to get out there and get noticed and do really stand out above the crowd because everyone's getting Trailhead certifications and you're just one of 50 people who applied for a role. And I was like, I really want to get into the operational side of stuff and understand, cool, we're doing this process, but are we showing that process to our leadership? Do they know what we're doing when we onboard? Found HubSpot and saw a couple LinkedIn posts about it. I was like, okay, let me take the dive and dove into HubSpot and was working as an implementation manager, ironically, when we were using HubSpot and like, hey, who wants to help fix this process? And I was like, hi. And we went in and we started messing around with pipelines. And I was like, this is really cool. And I just got way into it and then landed a gig at an agency for a little bit. And then after that, went from there. And now working for a company, we're doing some cool stuff and really just getting to live HubSpot every day and minister in that sense. I think it's been awesome. It's been a fun ride. I think there's a lot of value. And I think this is not new news by any means. It's definitely the coldest of cold takes, which is that HubSpot is more than a sales CRM or a marketing CRM. It's definitely something you can run your entire business out of. And something that we do right now at Ignite. We run almost every team in our organization touches HubSpot in some way if they don't operate out of it daily. With that and all that data, there's so much you can do. I think it's wild to not make the CRM the center of what you do.
Totally. I think it's obviously unique that you also have the experience of what onboarding and implementation actually is. So then you're using that and thinking proactively about building that out inside the CRM. I think that's super rare. We're definitely seeing it more where people are including onboarding in the CRM. But a few years ago when we started talking about this, it was not really happening very much. And I just think RevOps generally as a role or position is thinking about sales and marketing so much and mostly sales. And so to have like customer success and onboarding be thought of in that way is so awesome and great. So tell us some of the like learnings or maybe struggles that you noticed as you were climbing the ranks in implementation and kind of building that program out. Was there anything that stands out?
I always think the biggest thing is that if you don't have a defined process early on in your if you're starting, like if you're building an implementation organization, you're building an onboarding organization within a company, if you don't have, here's the steps we have to do to get someone live, that's where you have to start. People try to make it like it's different for every customer and like this and that. And I'm like, you still have to have, there's a prescriptive road they have to go down. They have to plug this in, turn this on, do this thing, and then they get there. And if you refuse to see that, you'll never get anywhere with your customers. And that's when I think like I've been in organizations where there is no process. And it's just like, we just get customers live and we hope for the best. And they hopefully stay. But we have a really big churn problem. We don't know why. And I think there's a lot of, I always think of the biggest in like revenue operations and just across the entire like go to market org. One of the biggest pain points is always like the marketing sales. You always hear like, ooh, marketing is like always like beating up sales and sales are always mad at marketing. And I'm like, that can exist in some extent from like sales to whatever your customer success organization looks like, whether it's you have a dedicated onboarding team or you don't, you have just a CS team that kind of does some of that work. There can be that similar kind of argument and pushback, but it's never called out enough. I feel like nobody focuses on that handoff nearly as much as they focus on like how marketing brings a lead to sales. I'm like, that's important. But just because they signed the contract doesn't mean they'll stay next year or next month or next 3 years, whatever your contract cycles are. People are super excited when they close one, and so many places just don't capitalize on it at all. They just let it fall off. And then like, you'll just get on board and you'll do what you need to do. And it's awful. And when you've worked in onboarding for a while, it's weird how you see it in other industries. People don't realize, I think, how much onboarding exists in everything that we do nowadays. I think back to my mom the other day was getting set up with Q Internet. And I opened the box and I'm like, wow, this is actually pretty easy. Like it's got like color coded numbers and it tells me this is step one and this is step two and this is step three. And then we got to a point where something didn't work. And their solution was like, call us. And I call and it's a 40-minute wait. And I cried and we stopped and we did something else. Like that pain point is something that you as a business need to make sure, like you can have the nicest packaging in the world for a product. But if you don't understand the pain points that could happen in that process and provide an equally nice way to deal with them, it's not any better. Like you might as well not have a nice packaged product. Once you have a process and then okay, you can't solve for every option that could go wrong, but you'll know pretty quickly if they get to this point, here's the things that could go wrong, and here's how we're going to preemptively solve them. Being very proactive in your onboarding approach is so important. Customers see that. They get annoyed when you have to be reactive. They are much happier and delighted when you're proactive.
You said so much gold in there. So much resonates. One, I don't care if you have every customer is unique and different. Then you need a lot of unique and different processes. Like you still need to document things. If your counter argument is, well, we do it a little bit differently for everyone, then you just need a lot more documentation, which is a pain in and of itself.
Yeah.
But what you were sharing reminded me of, when you're first starting to date someone or getting into a relationship and it's that honeymoon stage and everyone's excited. Then you go on that one like trip and you're like, whoa, what was that? That's what bad onboarding feels like. We just had all this fun in sales and marketing and now you're thrown over and it's good luck, Sherelle. Figure it out on that side. And it is night and day. And you're like, what just happened? And now it's good luck, figure it out on your own once I paid. And that's such a bad experience and such a bad way to continue that what could be super high engagement and high initial momentum then gets turned into the actual opposite. And to your point, whenever I hear we have a churn problem at day 30 or day 60, you have a really bad handoff and onboarding and implementation problem. And the output is what looks like a churn result at day 30 and 60 and 90.
I love the AT&T example. And I think a lot of people don't think about onboarding in that way, but it's so true where a lot of people are, if they're doing onboarding, it's like a handoff email to a customer success manager that's, hey, here's your new point of contact, do these 6 things in an email or whatever it is. As a customer, I'm receiving that and I'm like, okay, great, 6 things, I can do this. Maybe I'll do number 1, log in, whatever it is, do number 2. And then there's inevitably a step where I get stuck. And that stuck point is I'm a goner at that point. I had just dedicated time to getting up and running with this solution. And I said, okay, I'm going to work through it right now. And now I'm stuck. I can't get a hold of anyone. I don't know what to do. There's no resources. And now I'm just completely stuck. And who knows how long it's going to be until you get me back? Because I maybe was planning on just that day getting it set up. And now it might be 2 more weeks. And I think people just don't think about the customer's perspective on what they're experiencing when there are roadblocks like that and how much of a blocker it is and how like mentally devastating it is to be like, I thought this was going to be a quick and easy thing. And now I don't know when it's going to happen.
There's so many examples of stuff that you do where it's just, there'll be something you stop and you're like, I am done with this. I'm going to go do something else. Like you build furniture, it's the same thing. Like you get to a step, like, you need a hammer. And I'm like, why did you not tell me at the beginning I needed a hammer? Now I got to go find a hammer. I don't have a hammer. I'm done. I'm going to go make dinner. And then you have a half assembled bed in your office. I'm amazed at the amount of like processes and onboarding. And I think it happens in SaaS and it happens in every industry where there's any sort of like process to get you started, where like so many businesses just don't think about what do I need first? And you always hear people like, they're like, oh, it's so annoying when I open a booklet and it's, you'll need these 9 tools. You're like, do I need these 9 tools? And it's no, You need 8 of these tools. This ninth tool, I just know you might need. But I'd rather you have it now because then you can get this done in an hour because you already have the tools you need. And I think there's so much in onboarding process. They're like, I don't want to overwhelm them. I don't want to give them too much at once. And I'm like, there's overwhelming and there's just preparing, and they're not the same thing. And I think so many people are scared to overwhelm their new customer. They just signed. They gave you their money. They're not, realistically, they're not going to go anywhere for maybe 30 days. So it's okay to be like, these are all the things we need. Did you have this conversation with them pre-closed one? So many businesses wait till the closed one has happened to have these conversations. Inform them before closed one. Say, hey, if you want to do this launch day, if you want to launch this in 30 days, we can help you out with that. But I just know as a sales rep, you're going to need X, Y, and Z. Successful customers have X, Y, and Z ready to go. If we want to launch in 30 days, we can do that for you. We recommend 45, but we can do 30 if you have these 3 things. You do, great. Let me get you going. I think that is where that kind of the handoff is less like a singular point where it's I am done and now this person will take over. It is how can we layer that handoff a little bit better? We're going through that right now. It's like how do we layer that? At what point do we bring this person into the conversation so that it's not this sort of jarring experience where you go, I'm being wined and dined and all this stuff, and suddenly here's this new person that's just yelling at me for 6 different things.
Was there anything that you did when you were working specifically in onboarding implementation to collaborate with the sales team in that way to make it better? Or was there specific things you had to overcome working with them?
I think there's always like this sales rep's like, why are you in my space? Which is always hard. But I can't remember who, I think it was RJ you had on a couple of weeks ago. You guys were talking about how, as an onboarding person, I have a vested interest in seeing how you close the sale because there's so much gold in that closing argument. What convinced them to come to us? Because you have this integration. Great. As an onboarder, I need to know we need to focus on getting that. We can suck at everything else. We don't want to do that, but like we could suck at everything else, but you bought because of this integration. Let's make sure that is our number one priority coming into onboarding. And I think that taking that time to go sit with an AE or go sit with your closing sales rep or whoever that is in your organization and just see how they close and what is getting people across the line can help drive your focus goals. So much effort, I think, is put in by sales reps to be like, what are your 3 goals? You'll hear CROs and heads of sales. What are the 3 main goals that you got people to buy on? What are the 3 things that you got to buy on? And then they hold that information and never give it up. And I'm like, that is gold for an onboarder. If we know your motivations, like we want to capitalize on your motivations and make sure that's what gets you across the line. HubSpot does that with their onboarding process. So what are the 3 things you wanted to achieve in sales? Okay, these are the 3 things we're going to work on first because we want to get that time to value. Like you bought it, we want you to see it right away. And especially if you have a product that is long time to value, just by the nature of what it is, you want to find that thing that what was the thing that got them across the finish line, and let's make sure we prioritize that over anything else.
So you said something that really stood out to me about overwhelming customers. One of the, if not every single customer, almost every single customer that signs up for Arrows and starts building out their onboarding process with me always asks, is there such a thing as too many tasks? And I never answer that question. I always follow up with, what did marketing and sales promise? Because if they told you it's going to be a quick deployment and a few weeks to set this up, but actually it is a 6-month process, then there's a way bigger problem than overwhelming customers, because you shouldn't shy away from 200 tasks if those 200 tasks are the thing that's going to get me the value I paid for. Now, if half of them are selfish tasks, as I call them, tasks that we might want you to do, but don't really get you closer to activating for your goals and needs, then yeah, that is overwhelming and maybe feel counterintuitive to the expectations that were just set from marketing and from sales. But I think part of the challenge is, and I see this across, especially in SaaS, across marketing sites, you read it all the time in the headlines. Super easy to set up. Start sending your report within minutes. XYZ can happen overnight. And it's no, that's not actually what happens. And now you have really set these onboarding reps, CS reps, support reps up for failure, because you're never going to be able to deliver on that promise if the reality is a long, complex product to set up. Yes, there can obviously be such a thing as overwhelming customers, but if they are tasks and you communicate it in the right way, and I'm seeing value from that, then I wouldn't worry so much about the pure number and worry more about the tasks themselves and what you're asking people to do in that moment.
Yeah, it's so true.
And I think it goes back to, again, if I'm the customer, I want to know how long it's going to take me. So I can, because I like realistically, I'm blocking the time on my calendar. I am saying during this whatever time period I've been told it's going to take, I am blocking this time. I am allocating this time and my mental resources to get this done. So if you say it's going to take me 15 minutes and then I really don't get anything done in 15 minutes, I'm now annoyed and I have to find another time, and I have to like try to figure out myself how long it's actually going to take. So I think if there's so much internal management that has to be done around how long it actually takes and setting those expectations, but then also communicating to the customer, hey, this is going to take 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, this is what's happening. This is how much time you're going to need to spend to set up your internal kind of processes versus how much time we're going to spend coordinating things on our end. Like, people are afraid to overwhelm customers, but it's customers just want the information. They just want to know
Yeah.
what's needed. And then they'll allocate their time, they'll figure it out. But not telling them and hiding that information is just making it worse for everyone.
But I think it's like the fastest way to lose a champion for your product. There's been someone in that buying committee that has been like the one that said, I want us to pick this one. And if that person is there, the person is going to advocate for its use long after onboarding. But if you don't let them be aware of that, like they're going to lose that passion, and they're going to lose that sort of want for that product, because they're like, oh shoot, I said we wanted this and it's 40, it's going to take us 45 days to get done. Dude, I don't have time for that. That's the thing that, like, as someone now, like on the opposite side of the thing, as someone like in operations who's like shopping for stuff and looking for tools and getting demos all the time, the first questions I ask is, okay, but how quickly can I be set up? And I always judge the answer, because there's certain sales reps that'll say, we can get you set up in minutes. And I'm like, you're lying, because you're just wanting me to close the deal. And I'm like, it's not, I don't want you to tell me it's going to take me minutes to get set up. I want you to be realistic. Ask me that follow-up question of, what do you want to get done in 30 days? If it's a case of we're going through this right now with e-signatures, I want to be able to at least send out my existing contracts within 14 days of getting onto your platform. Great. If you already have your contracts, we can get you done in 7 days. Versus, hey, I may have said in the sales process, we also want to overhaul our contracts and do all this other stuff. But ultimately, to get me going, I'm happy to just get our existing process in place, and then we can work on making our new process so much better with your tool, because your tool gives us all these functionality and this ability to do this. And I can put properties in HubSpot, whatever. I think there's that sort of like level of conversation has to happen early in the sales process. And I think there's some organizations that are doing a really good job of that. And I think if you have the budget for solution engineers should work so closely with onboarding reps. Some of the best solution engineers I've worked with have been in onboarding, because they know what is doable in 30 days. They know what is doable in 60 days. And they don't sell the customer something that isn't really there yet.
The other thing I love that you said earlier is the proactive. Like, let me know proactively how long. If I have to ask questions, that is a quick way to delay the process, because now I have to wait for you to answer. Odds are I have to process the answer. Odds are I'm not going to like the answer. And then I might have to go think and, oh, now what do I do with this answer and this newfound knowledge? Whereas if you proactively tell somebody, we're going to review your documents and it's going to take us up to 2 weeks, now you have an answer. And you have a little bit of more insight into what I might be doing. You can go on and build your IKEA furniture in those 2 weeks while you wait, but you know that you don't have to sit here and wait for me to communicate that, or you have to ask and then get frustrated and ask again and get frustrated. It's just so the proactive piece feels very missing. And I understand it's not, I don't think people are trying to not be proactive. You just get hung up in 10 calls a day and multiple follow-ups, and that cycle just becomes very hard to maintain, especially in sales and onboarding and support.
This is my first time in an ops role, so I've been on the buying side and the implementation side a lot more as a customer now. And I really feel like it's the norm to be let down post-sale. Like, I hate to say it, but it just is. I have so little trust in the sales process for any tools anymore, because I'm like, I don't believe you. I just
Healthy distrust. You're doing good in the ops world, where you just trust no one.
I will say the bar is low. And so if you can be upfront, like, these are really small things. They're actually small tweaks that you can make that really change people's perspective. Because if you have someone in sales who is being honest and being upfront and setting clear expectations, that is such a big differentiator, because no one is doing it. So that's just such a great way to stand out as a vendor.
I always think of the phrase, you polish a turd, it's still a turd. I think I've used this at several companies. Nobody likes internet service providers. We all equally disdain on all of them. And for most of us, you have one, maybe two, if you're lucky, 3 options in your area for service providers. And they have these fancy JD Power Awards. I'm like, oh yeah, Comcast won it 7 years in a row. And I'm like, yeah, but they suck. But when you suck the least amount of group of people that suck, you win an award for it. And that is I've always said, do you want to be the least sucky, or do you want to be the best? And that is, I think that's a differentiator a lot of businesses really struggle with in customer success and in onboarding is they're like, yeah, but we just be better than our competitors. And I'm like, no, don't just be better than your competitors, be the best in your area. If you can prove that like we're going to get customers onboarded and get that sort of stuff, you don't see that many businesses that will have testimonials of people that went through about their onboarding experience. They always say the product's great. Or we were able to solve this problem with our product, but nobody ever wants to get a testimonial. I will give a testimonial about the onboarding experience if it was good. Because like that, I think like that's going to resonate with me as a buyer. Like it may not resonate with the top buyer person, but there's someone on every buying committee that is going to have to put this together. And if they get like a testimonial that says, hey, I'm you, I'm in your position. Terrell was awesome. He led me through this process and he gave me all the tools I needed and I didn't feel like I was struggling. That is the best kind of testimonial, I think, over your product could suck. But like the onboarding experience is amazing. People remember that. And that's, I think that goes back to anything. If you create that really nice experience that people will remember and differentiate from, you will keep customers a lot longer and they will talk about how awesome it was to their peers.
Yeah, and make the person buying and implementing the software look like a genius. I think that's a thing too. The company should feel like, oh my gosh, Matthew just implemented that software or chose to buy that software and it went so smooth and that was the smartest decision we ever made. Whereas again, the norm is like, oh, this was a rocky decision and we don't really like this. And you're just neutral at best about the decision that was made. So I think like thinking about it through like the customer is, there's a lot of like goals in there, but like the individual buyer wants to look like they are so smart for the decision that they made and they made the right choice, especially that most people are evaluating competitors and making a specific decision one over the other. They want to look like I did this and this was like my call and I made the right call here.
Yeah, I feel like that's a pretty good example of what a lot of people do with their CRM. A lot of the tools they buy, they go, it didn't do what we wanted it to do, but it's doing it enough. So we'll stay. And that is the sort of slow churn that eats me in the back of my mind all the time. People that are not unhappy, and I always use the example of NPS is a great tool, but it has its flaws and it doesn't focus on why are people passive. Like that is always something that's dawned on me. Really, detractors are a problem. They're often a sign of someone who's going to churn soon. Then you're positive, I can't remember the name of the positive ones are. I'm like your protractors. I'm like, no, that's a mathematical tool. Promoters, there it is. Your promoters are like people that are evangelists and they're going to talk about your product. But like the passive people, like I think sometimes are the ones you want to spend your time on because they're the ones that are not fully bought in yet, but they're also not upset. But it could just take one thing to throw them either way. And like NPS is a wonderful scoring tool, but those are the ones I always tell people, these are the people we need to watch because they are in the middle. They're on the median. We need to figure out why they're not going either way. And a lot of times they had a bad onboarding experience. They had like during setup, something didn't work the way they wanted it to. So now they're just they're doing fine. It's a solid B minus for them. They're like, it's working, but it's not working great. That's the issue we have right now with our current e-signature provider is that like it works, but it doesn't work the way I want it to. But I was like last year when we did a renewal, I'm like the pain to switch to another one is just so much. It was not enough to overcome that. And then now this year there's a cost difference. So I'm like that suddenly the pain has shifted and I'm like, cool, now I have a reason to switch to another provider. If it only takes a pricing change to have someone leave and then all these passive people switch to detractors. I think that if you give them such a good onboarding experience, they are less likely to move. They're less likely to go find a competitor. But at that point, if you've informed them early on what they're going to get, then I think they will want to stay. That they want to make the decision. Because I'll be honest, as an ops person, I don't want to go shopping for products every year. Like it's painful. It's no fun. I'd much rather shop for presents for myself. Like it's not a fun time to go shopping because you're going to get bombarded with AEs and they're going to message you on LinkedIn and they're going to ask you like all these things. I just think there needs to be more like if a company was to be like, hey, we're going to invest all our time in showing you that like, you're going to get value quickly from our product, show it in the onboarding process, not in the product. Because your product is going to be, it's either going to be great or it's not going to be great. But you can have a terrible product and a great onboarding experience and people will stay with you because like the onboarding was amazing. So I think there's so much value in highlighting the onboarding process more with your future customers and as early as possible.
Those quiet quitters you described are also dangerous because one, they're not using the product they're activating. When you ask them for feedback or thoughts or exit interviews, you tend to get answers like, you guys were a good team. You have a good product. It just didn't work for me. And it's what part of it didn't work for you. It might have worked for you actually had we gone into your pains and into your challenges.
Yeah.
And to your point, nobody wants to actually switch providers. Like I would rather you monopolize my whole business. I would rather call one customer success person who can handle everything, and it handles it so well that I don't need to call around to a million places. But that's not the reality. And to a lot of Kim's experiences recently, most CSMs, unfortunately, are just checking boxes on the other side and doing I did it. I did my activities. I did my calls. I did my check-ins. And yeah, but did you add any value?
I think a lot about what I was doing when I was project managing as implementation manager. The amount of times I would say, I have no stake in if you upgrade. I have no stake in if you do. I am paid a salary and I can bonus on the company's growth. I don't get paid if I get you to upgrade. But I'm letting you know that you need more, in that case, you need to buy more contacts. Like you're not going to be able to market to enough people quickly enough on the ramp that you want to do. And I feel like they appreciate that, just like honesty in the onboarding process. I am working I want to be a thought partner for you, not, just a taskmaster that's telling you to do things. I think that's huge. And I always worry, people talk a lot about, I think I've seen like a couple of like whisperings of like, how do we comp plan onboarding managers? And should they have quotas and this sort of stuff? And I'm like, I don't know. My hot take is I don't think onboarding should have any form of sales-based quota, because I think that's just going to make them like, it's going to give them the wrong motivation. Like you need someone who's, I want to be your friend in this process, not like someone who's just actively trying to get you to buy more things. And I can show you, to your point, like, I can show you a feature that you didn't pay for and be like, you have this paid and this would probably solve for it. Or here's how X company did it and solve for it. But I think that relationship has to be one of like mutual respect and not one that's coming from a place of, I'm still trying to get you to buy more things.
I don't think you should have quotas in onboarding. But what I've seen work well is like incentivizing discovery of growth opportunities in onboarding. So if I talk to you about a potential premium feature and then 3 months from now you upgrade into it or whatever time frame you set, cool, maybe you can get a $100 spiff or something to keep you excited about discovering those. But to straight up have people selling in that world, it just feels like a sticky or a slimy extension of the sales process.
Okay, so we are nearing the end, but I would love to get some of your takes now that because you've been in ops for a couple of years at least. And in all or most of those roles, you have been working with customer success and onboarding teams and getting ops set up inside the CRM.
So like I was somewhere like, it's coming from a space of using HubSpot primarily. So there's some slant in this conversation a little bit to that. I think there's a lot of value in having your CS team just be able to see product data. And I think it's wild if you don't factor product health and product usage into your like health scoring metrics and in your CRM. I think a lot of people don't utilize the tools inside of HubSpot for CS nearly as much as they should. Like there's so much value in like using the meetings scheduler. There's so much value in like using documents and having your team view documents that are technically like sales documents, because then you can start to see like, where are they viewing them? Where are they clicking? Where are they stopping reading? There's a lot of like stuff that's in there that's important. And I think that one of the biggest things that we did recently was we started giving each department in CS their own object, at least, that they were responsible for. But we have custom objects for certain parts of our process. And I'm like, you CSM are responsible for this object. This is your home. You make it what you want it to be. You're here, implementation associate. This is your home over here. You're going to build it. And we let those teams control how that looks, what it looks like, what is their day-to-day use of it. And that drove adoption much faster than me coming in and saying, you need this and this. Because when the people that work in it day-to-day get to have some say in how it's built, they will adopt that thing like crazy. And this is coming from a team that was like spreadsheet city. So they were so excited to get out of spreadsheets, but we're actually nervous. What does that look like? And I'm like, we can build whatever you want. We can build you like what you need and what you want to see. There's just so much functionality in letting your team see each other's data and be able to interact with it in some way. And that should be no different. That should be able to see what deals are coming our way. What are our sales team doing? What is marketing doing? Our CS team has such a good relationship with marketing because we're like, hey, these customers won't shut up about how good service is and how it's impacting their kids. They want to tell people about it. And we're like, marketing, here you go. It's wild to see somewhere where we actually see the flywheel work. Everything is going around in a circle. And I think that removing them from the CRM would be terrible in that sense, because then all that data stays out of it. I think a lot more people need to realize that centralizing that around one system, while it can be scary, is 100% worth it, because it's just so much faster to pull data and so much faster to pull what you need to see.
So I ran an onboarding team in my previous company. We were using Salesforce for our CRM. Only sales was in there. We had some kind of basic tracking in there for onboarding, but I wasn't, as an onboarding manager, living in their day to day. My day to day was in Trello, is what we used to
Yeah.
manage onboarding at the time. And then every once in a while, I would have an issue with a customer and I'd be like, okay, what did sales tell them? And then I'd have to go log into Salesforce, try to reorient my brain around how does Salesforce work? Where would this information be stored? And so there's also just that difficulty of I need to go reference information and I'm not used to this because I'm used to my system. Whereas if all teams are working together, I already know how the objects work. I know what record to go to. I know where the sales deal, and ideally it's connected to the object I'm working on inside HubSpot. And having all the teams in the same interface where they know I can look this up and I have access to the same kind of information
Yeah.
is so helpful for the individual onboarding or implementation team member.
100%. I think you have to by having everyone in the same platform, there's a lot shorter learning curve for people coming in. And like in my current org, we are hiring, it feels like exclusively like ex-teachers. People that are coming from places that don't use CRMs. This is their first CRM that they've ever encountered in their life. And they're coming in and they're seeing this and they're like, scared. And I'm like, it's not that scary. Well, we can walk you through it. And we did that this year. Actually, we launched like a little like HubSpot 101 course that was like customized to our portal. Here's where everything is and here's what it means. And so many people, like the amount of ticket volume that I get for basic stuff has decreased like 80% because like they can self-serve now. They know where to go and get the information they're looking for. And they're not afraid to leave a note on an onboarding person's object. They're not afraid to leave a note for a sales rep. Like they'll go have those conversations like in the platform, and I just cry in the background. I'm like, this isn't in a spreadsheet somewhere or an email chain. They're actively participating. And I think that is the hardest part of adoption in any CRM platform, is getting people to use it for day-to-day stuff. And when that starts happening, it's magical. You just got to let them get what they want out of it, instead of trying to force them down into this is what the industry says you need. It's no, listen to them and see what you can build to accommodate.
I think that last part you said is important, in that actually listen to them. Like, what are their day-to-days like? What's their pain? And that makes CS folks feel so heard, for one, and as part of the team, because they've always had to use spreadsheets and emails, and you're actually using all the components of a CRM. They're just all over the place and poorly integrated. And that's why you're frustrated, because you're having to do not just double, but triple, quadruple the amount of work because of this disjointed system of crap. When the answer actually is the CRM. But also, to Kim's point and your point, if you're just going to jam me into the same deal object that sales is using, that's probably going to feel worse compared to what I'm used to. When if we spend some time and build something a little bit more focused on my job, I'm going to lean in a little bit more. I'm going to see the activity that I want out of it. You're going to see the activity that I want out of it. And then you're going to invest more in time and money and effort to make it work even further.
100%.
Cool. Thank you so much for coming on and joining us. Any final thoughts that you want to share before we sign off, Matthew?
I think the most important thing is to really mirror what Sherelle said. If you're getting into operations, your first operations job, managing a CRM, or you're an accidental admin, the best thing you can do is just listen. I think that if you take the time, it's so easy to get into a new role. You're like, I want to make change on day one, and I want to do this, and I'm going to change this, and we're going to do this. That is the runway trip to Burnout City. I'm like, take the time to just listen, live in your people's processes, see what their pain is, hear what they're going through on a daily basis, because then that will help you build much better integrated systems. If you just go in, you need a pipeline and you need an object and you need this, you're going to build a bunch of stuff that's just going to end up not being maintained, doesn't get used properly. A year from now, you have to do a maintenance project. You're going to be like, we're not using 30% of our properties. That sucks. Why have we been collecting this data? Or one CSM is entering into this field for their customers. No one else is using it. I think there's value in just taking the time to listen and build a tool that they are excited to use.